What we're going to talk about is something that a lot of people over the weekend I've been hearing bits and pieces of, and I mentioned to somebody earlier, I said, there's nothing new here. We keep relearning the same things, repackaging them, and relearning them, and writing books about them, and creating new techniques, and then we'll read an old book and we'll go, wow, that's like that new thing that this person came up with, only it's different words, a little different ritual about it. But there's really nothing new. So I like to keep things simple. And also I love to study the intricate complexities of every technique and every trainer, everything people have to offer. And yet when that client's in front of me, I like to keep it simple. And I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure that a big part of where I got at the very beginning of my career, my professional career in hypnosis 31 years ago, about doing that first pre-talk with a client, I'm pretty sure I had some wonderful trainers that taught me in the beginning, and yet there was something else instinctive, just like all of you have something instinctively, intuitively, whatever you want to call it, inborn inside of you that gives you all these other sets of skills from behind the scenes in your own unconscious, what I call unconscious mind. And so that when that client is in front of me, very quickly in my career of working with clients, I figured out that about 80 to 90% of the success of that very first session happens in the pre-talk. And if that sounds like a lot, it does sound like a lot, and yet that doesn't in any way mean that what comes after that isn't essential and important. But the pre-talk, Erickson always used to say, people come in, they're already in trance. We don't have to put people into a hypnotic trance, because they're walking in with a trance that they're really, really good at. And I believe our job as the guide, the person they're trusting to come to us for help with whatever their problem, issue, condition is, that it's our responsibility to create a space with that client that allows change to happen. And I always say the expert in the room is inside of the client, behind or beyond their consciousness, their conscious mind. In other words, logical mind. And I call it subtext. My prior career, I call it my past life. For 20 years, I was in show business. I was a singer, an actress, a songwriter. I did all those things. And when my career shifted, because I had hands on my back from the universe going, okay, go here now. And all of a sudden I woke up and I was a hypnotist and realized, oh, that was my preparation. And I meant that more as the years go on. I realize it more and more and more. Because it's about getting into a space, getting out of your own head. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the learning state, something called the learning state. And it's where and we do it all the time, even if you don't maybe call it that, where you focus on a point, or you have your client focus on a point and really pay attention to that point, stare at that point maybe, and then you open up your awareness into the peripheral. Whenever somebody is in that state, it's literally called the learning state because it allows you to access your creative mind, and we know what that is. That's the part of the mind we're talking to as hypnotists, as hypnotherapists, right? So the creative part of the mind is where all the answers are inside of the client. And the other part of that space is I have to let my creative part of my mind, my unconscious mind, connect with their unconscious mind. And I believe it was Jeannie Laborde who talked about the communication loop, that my unconscious mind gets clues from the subtext, in other words, beyond the words that the client, the story they're telling us, and connects with that and starts getting clues. Sometimes I know consciously, but the rest is going to come in at the unconscious level, and then things are going to start coming out of my mouth naturally that I didn't plan to say. And I'm even going to be surprised. And I do record my sessions just for myself, and sometimes I listen to them later and I go, I don't remember saying that. Wow, who is that talking, right? So, and to me, that's a good thing. That means I'm in that zone, and that's when inevitably something comes out of my mouth. my good friend and colleague, and we work a lot together, Eric Rosen, he says, it comes out of your mouth, and then the client comes back the next week and says, there was that one word you said, and it wasn't one you planned. It came out all on its own. So part of the pre-talk is you all as hypnotists, hypnotherapists, or whatever you choose the term to use, for you to create a space inside of yourself that allows you to open up and invite your client into that space, the change space, if you will, because we're state shifters, aren't we? And we got to meet them where they are when they come in. And when I do this, I don't know how, like I said, I must have had some great teachers and whatever else was helping me at that point, that allows me to then, in that space, it's a ritualistic, metaphorical bubble, I call it, that I put myself and my client in. The world's still there, and if somebody's knocking on the door, or somebody's laughing in the next room, or a dog is barking, or a car backfires, all those things, it's there, because life is still happening out there, but it keeps that space where change is available, and where you're actually hyper aware of everything. You're in a more alert state, and we allow for states to change. We're state shifters, right? But we meet them in the state they come in, and here's their story. And listening to the story in the pre-talk, I talk about layers. I had some handouts. I had some for something else. This is a new handout. There's one that you get with your packet that you got for the class, but I don't have enough of these for everybody. If you email me, I'll send it to you. Because I wasn't planning to use this, but I like to have a little graphic thing to show. And I think of it as being in layers. Again, the subtext, what's happening behind the scenes at the client's unconscious mind. That's the part of the client I'm always talking to. Again, because that's the expert in the room. Why wouldn't I talk to their unconscious mind? So we're already hopefully starting to use hypnotic language as we're speaking to our client and listening, which is the important thing, of course, to listen for that subtext, I call it. So they present their story, their rehearsed story, and they're in, I always say they hit play, and they know their story, they've repeated it, they've talked to their doctors maybe about it, they've talked to their family, whoever will listen, and they've rehearsed that story enough that they're in that trance of, this is my story, this is who I am in this story, this is what is possible, and this is what's not possible, and all of those things are going to come out. So their behaviors and habits and their self-talk, which is, again, the self-talk is really important, because that's what's supporting their story. So as they're talking to us out of their mouth, we also know that's the same thing they're playing in their head. That is their self-talk. So we're hearing their words and we're going, well, that's what they're playing in their head. I've never been able to lose weight, right? I've always been a smoker. Oh, when you were 2? Maybe not. But, people have these stories that are creating their identity, and that's who they tell themselves they are. Now, the beliefs, as we know, the strongest beliefs that client has are the beliefs, we call it, at the level of identity. And that's just those kind of statements. I'm just the kind of person that whenever this happens, I always do that. Those kind of things. That they're telling us who they believe themselves to be. And that, in that first session, in my opinion, I call it shaking up the belief systems. I can't just say to them, you just said that. It's not our job, in my opinion, to give them advice or to tell them what they should do or what they shouldn't do or what they ought to want to do or what's possible, in my opinion, that they might be able to do. It's about listening to them in the first part of that pre-talk from a place of they're perfect, they're performing perfectly, they are a perfect being in this bubble that I create. And I'm able to look at them that way, like they're performing perfectly, and this is the outcome of all their beliefs, the subtext, their self-talk, their value systems, everything that they've adopted or adapted as far as behaviors and attitudes and habits. This is the perfect result sitting in front of me. So I'm going to listen to their unconscious. Now, their conscious mind, we need that too, don't we? In the old days, they'd say, knock them out, put them in trance because the conscious mind's useless. But you need that conscious mind. That's what got them in your office. That's the one that took in information. And I always say that got you here, sitting here with me, as opposed to being somewhere else today. So thank you, conscious mind, for making the right choice, coming to me, you know, and get them laughing. That's another thing, especially if it's something really heavy in that first meeting, if it's a heavy emotional thing, because I work mostly with doctors' referrals. If I can get them laughing a little bit about a few things while I'm explaining to them what's going to be different here than everywhere else they've been out there. So in that pre-talk, again, we all know about rapport. And if you haven't been trained or had trainers that also were incorporating NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, I just highly encourage you to get a lot of training in neuro-linguistic programming. In my opinion, it just enhances and amplifies your ability to be really good at what you do. And I was lucky enough to have my first trainers be trained in that. And a few months after I got trained in hypnosis, I went and took an NLP class, and I said, oh, wait a minute, we did that in the hypnosis class. So, and then I kept training in that as well. So that rapport building there's some great ways to develop that within yourself. And to learn how to look beyond the person, beyond the surface, whatever the presenting issue is, the presenting problem, that's not what we deal with as hypnotists, right? That's what all their other therapists and doctors and everybody else is dealing with. So, and the labels they bring in, that's that surface, the symptom, the label, the diagnosis. So since those of us that aren't licensed in something else that are hypnotherapists, we're experts at the stuff that's behind the diagnosis or behind the surface symptom or behavior or habit. So that's where we got to get, that's where that lives, at the unconscious mind. I used to say subconscious. Michael Watson, I started hanging out with a lot, and now I just changed a habit. I call it unconscious. It's all the same. To me, it's anything outside of the person's awareness. And I keep it simple for the client in that pre-talk, because I know there's books that'll have 5 levels of mind. I'm not going to do that with clients, so I keep it simple. Conscious is what you're aware of right now, and guess what? That's a teeny tiny little bit of what's going on. Because your conscious mind can't handle all this stuff. So it's deleting, distorting, generalizing, comparing to other stuff that's already stored in. And you only really are aware of a little bit, which is why 10 people can see a traffic accident. And when they interview them, it's as if it was 10 different traffic accidents. Oh, the car was blue. No, the car was red. No, he hit him from behind. No, that guy ran the light. And you get all these different stories because the conscious mind can't take in that much information. So we know that, and we know that whatever's coming out of their mouth is what has been evaluated and stored at the unconscious level. So we have to know their story enough to start hearing what are the beliefs that are supporting this trance that they're already in, so to speak. Here's the trance of I can't quit smoking, or here's the trance of I can't heal from this injury. The doctor keeps saying I ought to be healed by now. I don't know what's going on. Or I have this pain that they don't even know what it is. Nobody can figure out what's wrong with me. So we know that behind that is not going to be that surface presenting problem. It's going to be, we're going to be listening for beliefs, for that self-identity. And one day I was writing on the whiteboard in my class, and I was doing the loop about the self-talk reinforces what we call filters, so that the incoming information gets filtered through what we already have stored, and it's either rejected, no, that's not true, or it's let in as a possibility. And that loop, I was making that loop on my whiteboard in my office, and I was talking about beliefs at the level of identity. If their beliefs don't support the outcome, we have to shake up those beliefs. We can't get them there unless those beliefs get shaken up at first and get ready to change to a better belief, right? More useful belief. And then I went, and that all reinforces the self-talk. And then I went, self-talk, and then I wrote on the board, internal dialogue. That's our internal dialogue. And all of a sudden it went, oh my goodness, look at that. ID, internal dialogue, self-talk, beliefs at the level of identity that support the internal dialogue. And I went, we're helping the client change their ID, their internal dialogue that creates their identity. So I created a seminar on that because I thought, oh, isn't that clever? I used to be a songwriter, so you get the hook, right? And that's really, hooks are what we do in hypnosis too, because it's about what is the concept. We can learn all the ins and outs and details of all these different techniques and these wonderful things, and I love learning all of them, and I'm going to learn them as long as I'm able. And yet, when that client's in front of me, keeping it simple, remembering the basics is they're here for something. we help them clarify that, make sure that it's congruently, available and that they think they really can do this, or at least might be able to do it. In the case of smokers, it's a little different everything's a little different with smokers. But I've had smokers who left thinking it didn't work and it still worked. So they're a little different, than most of our clients. But a congruent goal is usually specific as possible, time-oriented if that's possible. It's got to be possible. It's got to be realistic, at least on some level of their being. If they can state the goal after you've helped them form it into those positive contexts, because we know they come in with all the things they don't want and they want to stop doing and not do this and get rid of that, and so we help them figure out what they actually want, so that the unconscious mind can say, oh, why didn't you just tell me you wanted me to do that? You've been telling me what not to do, and I just keep doing what I do. It's waiting for an action. Here's what I want you to do right now. I'm going to lose weight. So the unconscious mind goes, okay, I'll go back to sleep and just keep going on automatic until you let me know when you're ready. I'm going to. I will have $1 million. Okay, well, let me know when you're ready to actually do something. So our job is to get that goal now, in the now. In my training room, I have a clock. Instead of 12, 3, 6, and 9, it says now, 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 and now. Right? And the clock broke a couple weeks ago. Nobody's fixed it. And I keep looking at it, and it's like, well, it's still now. I just don't know on this plane which now is accurate. Yeah. So we're listening for where are they right now. And hopefully, like I said, you all have created a very specific ritual for yourself to get you into the right energy, or whatever words you're using for all of this work, into the state where you can create that space and hold it. And hold that space the whole time the client's there. I have this attitude that is so ingrained in me, and it started so early. Like I said, I don't know quite where this came from, but where that client is perfect, first of all, they're perfect. I know they're functioning perfectly. I know they want something different, so they got to change some things to get to that other perfect place that they'd like to be. But I know they're perfect, and I also know they've got everything they need to get there. So it's like, okay, here's the goal now. Now you know what the goal is. Now your unconscious mind, we can get that message to that part of your mind. The layers that I'm listening for beyond that surface that I talk about in the pre-talk is their belief systems, who they believe themselves to be, all the things I put on there that I don't remember, because I threw this together pretty quick before I left. But I was realizing their fears, of course, their doubts, their limiting beliefs, of course, negative emotions, because we know that there's no neutral, really. There's, as far as the systems in the body and the central nervous system and the cells and everything, there's not really a neutral. You're either growing and thriving and functioning as designed, or not, or going the other direction, right? I use the analogy when you put your arm in a cast, it doesn't just stay the same, right? Because it's immobile. It's the muscles start to atrophy, right? So, the bones are healing maybe, but things never stay, in life. That's not the way it works. So if it's a negative attitude that I see sneaking out, or if it's a fear or doubt, those are all the things that are going to surround why they're stuck. I think of it as in some way they come in a stuck victim mode. Otherwise they wouldn't have to come to a hypnotherapist. And there's always a little apprehension or fear because, just asking for help is not a pleasant thing to have inside of your neurology. I need to get help is not a good feeling inside. So our job is to, as quickly as possible in that pre-talk, again, that rapport. Ann Spencer, some of you are familiar with Ann Spencer, was the original founder of IMDHA. And I was lucky to go see some of her seminars early on, and in California when I was there when I started. And she said one time, and I'll never forget this, she said, when the client walks in the door to come and see me, she said, I send out, I love you. In my mind, I go, I love you. And when she did that, I could feel it now still. And she said, and they feel that. Now that was her little ritual to start that connection. So hopefully you have something you do. I have an all-purpose thing that I created called, I named it Pivotal Response Conditioning. Looks a little bit like the anchors and triggers in NLP and some other things. But I turned it into a resource anchor, if you will, that is, I use it for everything. That's it. That's it. If I get out of focus, if I start to get low on energy, I can do that and nobody's even going to notice. Although my students once in a while say, you just did that. And I didn't even know I did it. I said, I must have needed something because it's trained in now. But that's what I do before that client walks in, to remind myself it's not about me. It's not about what I think, or even what they told me on the phone, if that's the case, or what I know about that thing they're coming in with. It doesn't matter, or what anybody else had that same problem. It's everybody's unique. So to me, it's a clearing mechanism. This means everything goes away, everything. Because I know my unconscious has all my training up to that point. That's not the time to go take another class, so I got to trust it, right? It's like when you're taking a test. Now's not the time to go study some more and go, oh no, I don't know. So it's like clear everything, trust, and this takes practice, right? To trust ourselves. And remember, it's not about us, it's about that person, that perfect, wonderful person that has a beautiful goal, and they're trusting us. We have the honor of introducing them to their unconscious mind, which is where all their power is. That's why I call it the unlimited mind, because the imagination has no limits. And that's why it's so powerful. And here's the other thing. My first medical hypnotherapy teacher that I studied with a lot, Michael Preston in Arizona, and he wrote a book called Hypnosis, Medicine of the Mind. He impacted my life. I get chills when I think of him too. I got a lot of stories about Preston. But he said we teach people how to think. And he said everything starts with a thought. Everything starts with a thought. Now, repetitive thoughts can become habits, right? Someone can create panic attacks by repetitively thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh, it's so, I'm in danger. And pretty soon it just shows up, and they have a sense of not being in control. That's why I said that in some way they walk in stuck in the victim mode. So our job in that first session, that to me is so all important, that first interview, is to use everything that we detect as evidence from because their unconscious mind knows why they're there, even beyond what their logical mind has figured out, right? So we're going to listen to the unconscious subtext that's going to give us clues that are coming out from them verbally and non-verbally to our unconscious mind to help them get what they're there for. Because what they're there for is something to make them healthier. The unconscious mind runs the body. It always wants to move toward health. If you leave it alone, it always moves toward health. That's the good news. It only gets in the way when we get all that other stuff, fears and doubts and all that kind of stuff. So we're listening to that. And by asking questions and staying open, and then once I get a sense that now I'm seeing, and I start, let's say a resource pops out. You know, they're there for something that is very heavy, and they're very low energy, and they're very down, and they're in this mode. And all of a sudden I'll ask a question that they'll go, well, there was one time that, and I see their energy shift a little. I'm gonna stop them, and I will immediately apologize. I say, stop. I'm gonna interrupt the pattern. Because now I got them in a more positive state than they've been in the whole time they've been there. I'm going to interrupt it, because I want them to come to the now, because they were in this mode, right? And I want to interrupt the pattern, because now I'm going to start teaching them how to interrupt patterns. Now this was a positive one, but if it's positive, I want to interrupt it in order to get more. I want them to go there some more, because there was a time, but now no. Stop there and tell me about that. Tell me about the time when that, because your energy, their energy shifts. And you know what you can do then? Get them back into it, have them close their eyes. Tell me more, be there now as if it's happening again. Because you said that was a time when you really felt confident, you really felt healthy, whatever it was. What was around you, what was happening, what were you thinking, what were you smelling, what were you tasting maybe, what were you hearing, if there's visuals. And then of course at the height of that, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to say, now take a big breath, intentional breath, and press finger and thumb together on one or both hands. Just press them. They don't know why they're doing it, and I'll clarify it later. But I want to grab those resources when they show up. Plus, I want to get them in a better state. If it's a heavy-duty thing they're coming in with, and I can get them to think about one time when things were good, or when they did have the health they want, or when they were a non-smoker, whatever it is. I want to grab that and re-access it for them and anchor it, in other words. And I just have them do that, and then I'll build on that. And if you can do that 2 or 3 or 4 times in the pre-talk by asking questions, well, was there ever a time that you did quit smoking? You know, for smokers, a lot of times they have reference where, oh yeah, I quit for 5 years one time. Yeah, really? Well, that was quite an accomplishment. Tell me about that. Close your eyes. So I'm going to grab those resources, the state, in other words, we're state shifters, remember? Grab that state that they have in their neurology still, in their brain and their mind, and anchor it. And then I'll say, now just come back out here. I'm not telling them I'm doing hypnosis, but we know that they're already in trance coming in, first of all, you know, and the trance they're in is what isn't what I want. This is creating what I don't want. So then I'm creating little mini trances in the pre-talk of a state that will get them what they actually want, because that's what our job is. And you all know about fractionation. You know, I was taught, you know, if somebody's hard to get into hypnosis, which I find funny actually, but you know, because they're already there. Like I said, you know, go close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, go, you know, 10, 4, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 3, 5, whatever, confusion techniques, whatever you're doing. And then, you know, and then now open your eyes, come back out here. And so, you know, how did that feel? Did that feel? Oh, now close your eyes again and go back, you know, in and out, in and out. I think of the hypnosis, the pre-talk as being all that fractionation, see? So they've done a little mini trance to get into a positive state, and then I bring them out. And then the other thing of interrupting is once I've heard enough about I can't, I've never been able to quit smoking, whatever it is, I'm gonna then, the next time they say it for the 3rd, 4th, 5th time, I'm gonna stop them in the middle of the sentence again and say, stop. I'm not being rude. I said, I'm doing this because you're paying me to help you. And I just want to point something out. You've said this like 5 times since you've been here. And let me explain to you why that's important. Because you're hypnotizing yourself. You're reinforcing the negative hypnotic state of being out of control smoking cigarettes when you're sitting here with your logical mind saying, I don't want to do that. So I'm teaching them how to interrupt their patterns, and I'm going to use that and build on that in every session. Now with smokers, I only see them for I do a interview meeting, and then but I'm doing hypnosis, but I'm not calling it that, right? But like I said, they're already there. And then I do one session for the smoking. But for most things, I usually do 3 sessions. So I can build each time, and then I have them practice it. But that pre-talk is where we can access resources, we can start interrupting their negative patterns and bringing it to their awareness. Because remember, you can't change something if you're not aware of it. So that idea of knocking out the conscious mind never made sense to me. I said, that's got to be on board. And when your conscious and your unconscious mind are going in the same direction, guess what? A lot of names for that, the flow. That's when, oh, this is easy. Why didn't somebody tell me? You know, that was so easy. Why didn't somebody tell me this before? Because that's when all of the parts of us congruently are moving in the direction of what's healthy and going to make us happy and all that. So interrupting patterns, getting to the deeper levels of belief systems, and again, those are things that if they don't match the goal, if they're contradictory to the goal, we know we got to shake them up. And I don't think it's our job to tell them what it should be instead. We find out by asking them. Well, if you didn't have that anxiety, what would you have? You know, if they can't figure out what, I'm here because I don't want to be so anxious. If you weren't anxious, what would you have? What would you be if you weren't anxious? You know, if you didn't have that. And they'll tell you. And then you say, well, what do you imagine that's like? Because see, they come to us not because of a goal that they think is the goal. I want to stop smoking, or I want $1 million, or I want a good relationship, or I want to be free of cancer. They don't come because of that. They come because of what they imagine it's going to feel like to have that goal, right? So if they can imagine what it's going to feel like to be cancer-free, for instance, even something that serious, then we can get the elements and get them to get into that and develop the elements and then start accessing those resources within them in other contexts in the pre-talk. Are there any questions? I feel like I'm just yakety. That's what I do.
You're doing great.
Yeah. Oh, Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I just came up with this little chart because when I talk about the layers and the subtext and using their current trance and shifting their state, listening for the thoughts that are supporting the current thing they don't want, and finding ways to, I love affirmations with clients. I give my clients affirmations to practice in between sessions, or I'll get them to write one out. I have these little whiteboards that they can write on, and then we make it even clearer. How can you make it more powerful, or a statement, or a word that can be a power word that represents their goal, or something like that. And when people say, well, I don't really believe in affirmations, I tried them once, they didn't work, and I say, well, you know what, I know somebody who went to a gym one time, and it didn't work very well either. Habits are, you got to do them a few times usually. And then I'll repeat to them. I'll say, you know what, you're already doing affirmations. And then I'll pick up my little notes that I've been taking. I'll say, it's hard for me to quit smoking. It's hard for me to lose weight, whatever it is. You've said that like 8 times here, so that tells me you probably say it a whole lot more out there in the world. So that's your affirmation. Your self-talk is your affirmation that's going to support and keep manifesting your current situation, your reality. Because reality is nothing more than what we think it is. We create meaning for what happens here. That's why, again, people can have similar challenges, I'll just call them, or even diseases, and have very different, chemically and as far as doctors can tell, they might all have the same diagnosis and same basic things going on in their body, and yet they're all having different outcomes from whatever treatment they're getting. So what's that about? The difference is the thought and the attitude. Oh, thank you. She said I'm a 10. Isn't that nice? I like that. Okay. So the habits and the patterns and the things that are supporting the stuck state are the things that we know got to start shaking them up and shifting. And again, I do I think of it more like Ericksonian style, I guess you'd call it, if you had to put a label on it. I'm not into labels, but conversational. Basically, my patterns of language when I'm doing hypnosis with people is I just call it abstract. Because once I start the induction, after that pre-talk, usually I spend, the first pre-talk, usually I'll spend minimum probably 45 minutes, because I just feel like there's so much I do in there, and those little mini trances, and they're starting to use their imagination, they're getting into some more positive states, so that by the time I do the induction, they're raring to go. I want them to be excited. I want them to think, wow, this really is different than anything else I've ever done, and I'm excited. To have that sense of this is going to be fun, and this is a natural thing, because hypnosis, like I said, they're already in hypnosis. They're very good at the trance they're already in. We're just going to give them a better trance. And so then by the time I do the induction, it's so easy, because they're like, oh yeah, let's do it. Let's go there. And it just makes your job easier. Not that it's a job. I don't think of this as a job at all. It's a privilege, and it's fascinating. So any questions so far? Like I said, your handout that you got is more technically written, that I wrote for this, that's got some more things about the pre-talk and questions you can ask and that. This I wanted to give more of an overall concept, because there's not time to go into each one of those things. And if anybody that's watching this either now or later, I don't know if they're watching now anyway, but that sees this in the future even, you can contact me at uphypnosis@yahoo.com, and I will send you the other handout that I didn't have back then, because I just created it. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought you're just sending me good energy. Right? Yeah. Yes?
I might have a quick question. I just came today. I'm a Sunday only guy, and the reason I'm asking that, so I didn't get a packet or anything.
Oh.
You were talking about handouts.
Yeah, well, email me for mine. For the rest of it, you'll have to ask him at the desk. Yeah, he was asking about the handouts. So anybody who sees this forever, I love to give things out, so just contact me, and I'll be happy to fill in whatever spaces you might not have about this. So again, hopefully you have a ritual to get in the space with your client. See them as, a perfect being that wants something to change. That's all it is. And for something to change, like I said, you're kind of helping them recreate who they are, who they believe themselves to be. As soon as they believe themselves to be someone who knows that being healthy and having energy and living a long life for my family is way more important than those stupid rolled up sticks that I've been putting in my mouth and lighting on fire. Who does that? You know, with smokers, I get a little more assertive, because if they come to me, they're giving me permission. They want to quit. They probably tried 20 times before. And I'll say things like that, and just to put it in the realm of absurdity. And yet I know people who lived to 90 and smoked all their life and never had a problem. So I don't try to talk people into anything. It's up to the client what they want, again. You know, it's not up to me to judge. That's the other thing, by the way. That's what I meant to say earlier. That bubble has zero judgment. And I don't know how I do it. Maybe it's because I was an actor. I don't know. But if you have to act and pretend, you know, fake it till you make it, you will get used to seeing them as perfect and knowing they have everything they need. Your job is to help them access it and then use it, utilize it, right? And that's, to me, that's what that's about. And without judgment, without judgment. If there's something they're asking you to help them with that you have a part of you that says, ooh, I'm not so sure about that, or send them to someone else, please. Do them a favor and refer them just gently, kindly. And my way that I do it, if I get just even it's happened in 31 years since I've been doing this, maybe twice. I've had a client that I got an uneasy feeling, I didn't know why. And I never thought about it after. I just listened to my instincts. And at some point, here's the way I handle it. You know, the more I'm hearing from you, the more I'm starting to think this might be outside of my scope of practice. That's my out. And then I know a lot of people in the field. Hopefully you interact with a lot of other hypnotists all over the place. And I say, you know, I know someone that I think would be really, really well suited for this issue that you have. And then I just gently and lovingly and kindly send, thank you, honey, I thought. I'm only a 5 now. Oh, I'm going downhill fast. So, any questions about any of that? So, does that make sense though? It's I thought when I put that together, I said it's like layers, because I always talk about subtext, listening behind the words. And, you know, body language can be misleading if you take a class that teaches you how to, this means they're closed off. Not always. Not always. I've had people go through classes with me that were like this, that came as volunteers, and the students thought, oh, I couldn't get them to relax. And they said, I've never been that relaxed in my life, you know? And they were very open, you know? We read people differently. That's your conscious mind. So have a ritual for you to get into that smarter part of your mind, the unlimited mind, where there is no judgment. Everything's perfect just as it is. And if you want something to be different, something has to change. And our job is to figure out in that client what needs to change so we can help them get this thing they want instead of this reality that they're living. With that love and caring and rapport and respect. Respect. And many people this weekend were talking about people come in feeling broken or like there's something wrong with me, kind of, even when it's not a physical thing. They feel like, you know, they feel guilt and regret. To smokers, I noticed just in the last 10, 15 years, it switched as the smoking thing changed culturally. And people came in, after I moved to Florida, they started coming in with shame. And I'd never had that before. Before it was always, you know, this is just annoying and I'm tired of everybody complaining about it, you know, but it changed, and they come in with shame and guilt, and they're hiding it sometimes, you know. So that's what we're dealing with, is those things. And then what we want to give them is lift them out of that, put them on the other side, get them out of that victim status that I can't control this, and show them they have control over it. They just have to, we teach them how to tell their unconscious mind what they want it to do right now, not tomorrow, right now. And if it's a long-term weight goal, I say, well, then your mantra can be, I am now in the here's what you're going to think about all day. Instead of that old thing you were thinking about how hard it is, and you just can't lose weight, and every time you lose weight, you gain it back. You got rid of all that junk. Now you're going to say, I am now in the process of achieving a weight of 125 by December 31st this year. I found out you got to be specific about the year, too. You know, we learn as we go, you know. Right? So that's their new mantra. And then we teach them how to interrupt their patterns. I use my pivotal response conditioning, because it sounded really cool for my dissertation, it sounded very intelligent. But it's a state shifter. It's like, now I'm back here, the Star Wars shield goes up, the negativity has to leave, and I'm filled with all the stuff that's going to help me get my goal. I'm focused. And here I am, moving toward the goal. I get off track, I get scattered. Monica Gear's doll the other day, she was talking about the sparkler. I love this imagery. I'd never heard this before, that we get scattered, because I talk about that a lot. And first thing I thought of was, those times when I'm scattered, but she talked about a sparkler. The sparklers you'll hold and things are flying off. And she said, bring it back in and integrate it, and it calms down. Now you're centered again. It's just a different way of thinking about it, because our unconscious thinks in metaphors. That's what it does. And that's why it can create a new metaphor for this new reality, and they can keep focused on that and find a symbol maybe of what that end result means to keep bringing that back into consciousness whenever they interrupt their patterns and go, okay, refocus on the goal. I had one client a long time ago that had a problem ad-libbing with his guitar when he was sitting in with other bands. They'd say, take it away, and he'd freeze. He was a really good guitar player, but anytime that he was put on the spot, he would freeze. And he loved Wes Montgomery. So Wes was the word that his state shifted instantly whenever he'd talk about Wes Montgomery. So that was his power word. And when he would do his breath, Wes was and he got into that mode. And that empowered him, because that's what we do. We teach our clients how to be empowered. I think I'm done, because now I'm a 1. 1s aren't bad, because you're first. Thank you. Thank you very much.